Yeah, I think we've got a pretty good group uh, that have joined already. So, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everybody on the call. Um, my name is Susan McKenzie. I'm going to be your facilitator for the next hour and a half or so. I am I've been a patient partner for about the last 10 years in the area of kidney disease and transplant. I myself am a kidney transplant recipient um, with a genetic form of kidney disease. It's also affected a number of members of my family. So it's a thrill for me to be here and to chat about this topic today. This is a part of the PXP collaborative series of webinars. Uh, PXP meaning for patients by patients, and the patient engagement research ambassadors at the Canadian Institutes of Health Research Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis. This is the fifth webinar in the series to take place since it was started in 2024. And we will chat the link to the series. We will drop that link in the chat. It's already there. So have a look at the chat. Some of you, I understand, have probably attended these webinars in the past. So if you have, welcome back. Um, uh, I, we've got some momentum going between this webinar and the next one in September. But today's webinar is about on the topic of growing your influence as a patient partner, and is for and by patients, um, and open to anyone who's interested in learning and listening more about this topic. So a few housekeeping, just a quick housekeeping comment. We're using the language today, probably language that you've heard before, terms like patient, patient partner, consumer, patient engagement, patient and public involvement. These are terms that are used interchangeably, and you may be using other terms as well, based on your personal experiences and where you live. But regardless of the term that we use, please know that we're all here to talk about the same thing, which is how people with different types of lived and living experience are working in partnership with researchers. I'm going to start then with the land acknowledgement as well. So I'm situated here, actually in Stratford, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwa peoples. It's a territory covered by the Upper Canada treaties. I would like to recognize and express my appreciation for their historic contributions to this area, as well as the contributions of the Métis and Inuit and other Indigenous people who have helped shape this area and to shape our experience as settlers. I would also want to just recognize that we just had on May 5th was Red Dress Day. Some of you may have seen some things about that. So that's a National Day of Remembrance for the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And part of the Truth and Reconciliation Agreement is to obviously keep those memories alive and ensure that we are not repeating the past. So on that note, I will continue with a couple of other quick housekeeping notes. So we're recording the webinar, which I'm sure you've seen, and I probably had to click off. And that will be available after today. Dawn will put a link in the chat on that, so you'll know where to get that. Closed captioning is available if you're new to this platform. So just click the CC, which is at the bottom of your screen in a square, two C's in a square. And you can also click on your choice of language. So one other thing that was new to me, so it may be new to you, but we're going to ask that you use the chat if you'd like to share resources or comments or information about yourself. But if you have a question for myself or one of our panelists, please use the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring that for questions throughout the webinar. You can also raise your hand button, so you can be unmuted for a particular question. You don't have to turn your camera on, but be aware that if you're asking a verbal question, your voice and name may become part of the recording. We have a social media hashtag for today, which is a number sign PXP25, which I'm sure will also be in the chat. And with that, we are going to get started with the webinar. So we have a wonderful panel for you here today, which includes Trudy Flynn, Duncan Redburn, and Dawn Barker. We're going to, they're going to each share a little bit about themselves and their background in this space, and then we'll do a little bit of a kind of a dialogue, fireside chat type dialogue with some questions. So I'm going to start by asking Trudy to introduce herself, tell you a little bit more about herself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. I just double checking to see that I'm off mute. I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The Mi'kmaq people signed a treaty of peace and friendship with the British Crown. And I just wanted to say that in Nova Scotia, we are all treaty people. So I've been involved with patient engagement for almost 15 years. And I actually got started, interestingly enough, through a clinical trial that I took. I live with fibromyalgia, and I've had fibromyalgia for over 30 years. And the clinical trial was a part of fibromyalgia. And that clinical trial led me to different opportunities. So it was very important in my life. And so it was the reason that I was invited to become a patient partner on a JLA, which is a James Lind Alliance research project, which is really the gold star of patient engagement. So I started out at the top of patient engagement, and I was really interested in the process. And so when I was invited to be part of the Pain Summit in 2016, I said yes. And it was at that Pain Summit, though, that I realized that not all research is at the James Lind level. And listening to researchers who actually wanted patient partner input, I realized that they speak a different language than we do. And so it was mentioned to the researchers that if they wanted our input, they had to actually speak our language. And that worked for about 5 minutes. And after that, it went back to very difficult language for patient partners to understand. And actually, at that point, I realized that I needed to become more involved in patient engagement so that I could change that. And fortunately for me at that time, I was invited to join the CIHR Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis as a research ambassador. And I was thrilled to be asked because I thought, well, this is a way to change, because it's easier to change things from the inside than the outside. So I did that for a couple years, and then a new scientific director came along, and he developed a new mandate for patient engagement at IMHA. And I went from being I went from being a research ambassador to a patient engagement research ambassador. And in that role, I was involved in developing modules with the rest of the team that are a really good resource for teaching patient engagement to both researchers and patient partners. And so I did a lot of work at the federal level, and I realized I wasn't really doing much at the maritime level, which is where I'm from. So that led me to become involved with the Maritime Spore Support Unit and connect with more research projects. And my interest in research is mostly based on dementia, because I was a caregiver of my mom who had dementia. And of course, anything to do with fibromyalgia, but there's not a lot of research out of the Maritimes on fibromyalgia. and anything to do with improving healthcare. Those are the areas that I really focus on. And I must say the confidence that I gained at IMHA mostly made me realize that I could put myself out there and be involved in more than what I was doing, and things that meant a lot to me. And my daughter also has fibromyalgia, so I think as a parent, you really become more connected to a community when you're advocating on behalf of your children. So when something's published on a government website here in Nova Scotia, promoting fibromyalgia as more of a psychological or psychiatric condition, and I wanted to change that, I realized that there was no national organization for fibromyalgia. There was really nobody I could reach out to say, can you help me with this? And so I'm kind of a person who likes to tackle things that I think are injustices. So I ended up talking to another person in Ontario, actually, and together we realized that there really is no national organization for fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is an add-on to other conditions. And so it's arthritis and fibromyalgia, migraines and fibromyalgia, ME and fibromyalgia. And there really was nothing for people like myself and my daughter, whose primary conditions are fibromyalgia. So in 2021, myself and this other person decided we were going to change that. And we invited a group of people. We contacted them through support groups, and Fibromyalgia Association Canada was born. And I currently am the chair of Fibromyalgia Association Canada. And I think in 4 years, we've come a long way. I Due to my work at IMHA, I also became a member of the PXP steering committee on its inaugural year. And that was a wonderful experience. And so throughout the conference, I was a moderator, and I was also um, a presenter. So I just find that one thing kind of leads to another in patient engagement. And so I really have enjoyed doing the patient engagement part. And I just wanted to say that I like the idea that this webinar is on May 12th, because May 12th is Fibromyalgia Awareness Day. So for everybody out there with fibromyalgia, I just wanted to make sure you know that you're being seen and heard. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Trudy. That's amazing. That's incredible. Exciting. We're excited to hear more about it. And you can see Trudy's more information about her bio in the chat as well. So we'll go next to Duncan to share a bit about himself.
Thanks, Sue. Appreciate it. I'm here today in Ottawa, coming from the unceded and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin peoples, and quite happy to have found this new home here in Ottawa. After 21 years of service in the Canadian Forces, I lived all over Canada, from Kingston to southern Manitoba, New Brunswick, Edmonton, which is where I retired in 2021, and then was able to move here to Ottawa to be closer to my wife's family. So it's been great for my family to end up here and make the connections I have recently with this community in particular. So as I said, I served in the Canadian Armed Forces as an infantry officer for 21 years. Running around in the woods, carrying heavy things and having a good time with some great people. But that took its toll. It was a pretty high impact lifestyle for a long time, and I definitely took full advantage of what my body could do at those times, and that has had its knock-ons now. So where I come to this community is I was very fortunate as I retired that a Canadian Forces veteran who I had actually put through training reached out to me. He had left the Canadian Forces sooner than I did and had found himself a very cool job with the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence, which is out of McMaster University. And he reached out and said, hey, this is what I'm doing now. It's pretty cool. And we could really use more veterans on our advisory council. And I said, I have no idea what any of that means, but I'm in. So I joined the team in 2021. And since then, we have I've had the chance to participate in 3 annual stakeholder engagement conferences and have met some great practitioners and clinicians and researchers who are out there working on figuring out the links between Canadian Forces and first responder veterans, so RCMP, firefighters, paramedics, and the link between their careers and chronic pain. So I've been to 3 or 4 conferences, having some great discussions and meeting a great community of people. And then have also leveraged, like Trudy was talking about, the James Lind Alliance. We use that platform as well. And we have participated as a group of the Advisory Council of Veterans in 3 research prioritization meetings over the last 3 years. We do one annually where when we started, it was to get a whole bunch of research proposals from individuals all over the country, researchers from universities looking to do work. And then we kind of shaped and prioritized where we thought those research topics would best serve the veteran community. We've kind of flipped that now to where we pick the topics. And then when the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence pushes out its request for research abstracts, it does so with these topics attached to it to say, hey, this is what our veteran patient partners feel is what is percolating in the veteran research community now, and where we would like to see research go forward. So to date, I believe the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence has funded just shy of 60 research projects. We have a handful of them are coming to completion, which I'm sure we will discuss later this summer at our stakeholder conference, and then in the fall again at our next prioritization meeting. So for me, entering into this world of being a patient partner came from a perspective of being an advisor, and then was very fortunate enough that the CPCOE has brought in the James Lind Alliance and how we prioritize and how our voices as veterans are being used to reach out to the research community to say, hey, these are the things that is front and center for us. If the opportunity is there to do the research, you'll find traction. It will make a difference when it lands. And then the second challenge is slowly building our network of trying to find veterans. If anyone has had a chance to look at Veterans Affairs Canada's most recent report on veterans, I believe the research went from 2019 to 2021, and it was released in 2024. Something like 450,000 Canadians can consider themselves veterans. However, that is over the better part of 60 or 70 years. How much each person served, we'll never really know. And where they live now has nothing to do with what they did in the Canadian Forces. So even if we were to look at those hubs of Canadian Forces, concentrations across the country like Edmonton, Cold Lake, Victoria, here in Ottawa, even New Brunswick, there's Gagetown, Halifax, those locations, although they have active members in the Canadian Forces, that's not a good representation of where veterans are. And where the CPCOE is putting its effort is obviously what is happening with treatment and care and research on veterans. As we transition out of the Canadian Forces, that change of identity, of no longer having the uniform to wear, is shocking enough as it is. And then this very weird and unique situation to find yourself looking at the healthcare system in a whole new way, and how to find care, how to find specialists, how to knit all those pieces together. So veterans are not a homogenous group, and getting a good read on where veterans are at and what their priorities are is a challenging endeavor. And that's where it's been really fun to watch that build over the last 3 years of my involvement with the CPCOE, of finding different pockets of veteran organizations throughout the country who I can reach out to and say, hey, are you interested in doing, are you interested in floating this idea, this research idea to your veterans, and to see if they can be involved, so that the research on veterans is not just happening on, what we would stereotypically see as a veteran as old, in their 60s or 70s, having served in Korea or World War II, and instead transitioning that perspective to whether that was Bosnia and the former Yugoslavia veterans, or the Afghan veterans, or even now, since it's been 10 years since we were in Afghanistan, just veterans of the tempo that the Canadian Forces is working at right now, which is also still quite high. So it's been a challenging endeavor, and it's been a lot of fun, and finding organizations like this that are putting patients front and center is definitely beneficial for the veteran community. So I'm very happy to be here today. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Duncan. That's super exciting to hear about what you're doing, and kind of flipping the script on, traditional research. There is a question in the chat just before we go to Dawn that is specifically for you, or sorry, in the Q&A, which is where it's supposed to be. And you kind of talked about this, but I just wondered if you could just elaborate on it quickly, which is, how do you reach out to veterans, and do you target specific groups or send to everybody?
Yeah, it's pretty challenging. Thanks for that question, Peter. It has been a challenge since I started with this with the CPCOE back in 2021. How do we lean in, and who do we reach out to? In general, VAC has a lot of abilities to reach out to veterans. However, they have limitations in how much information they can share, obviously, because the reason that they have that information on veterans is not the reason we would be reaching out to them. So there's Privacy Act issues that are there. The Legion, the Canadian Legion has put itself out there as a conduit by which we can reach veterans, which is a useful resource. However, the membership of the Canadian Legion of, let's call them my generation of veterans, is low. So again, that wouldn't really get us a broad data set if we were to do research on the individuals that the Legion is attached with. And that's a grand generalization on my part, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are some legions across the country that have a broad spectrum of age groups. So a lot of what I have been doing anyways is, there are a lot of, let's call it like grassroots, organizations that have tried to stand up and are standing up with the level of resources enabling that they have across the country to have veterans kind of stay together as a community and support each other and enable each other. So that's kind of an ad hoc and hey, who do you know network. I try and grow that one with as little bias as possible. 21 years in the Canadian Forces, I have a lot of connections out there, and I still leverage a lot of those friends of mine who are involved. But it's still challenging. Like, it definitely is challenging. There is no way to hit a button. Like, there's no bat signal for veterans across the country. And even if there was, I would doubt the amount of veterans who would answer the call, because some veterans just like their space and like their peace and quiet, and just don't want to be involved anymore. And I respect that, and I understand that, and I would love to be able to crack crack that veneer to get at those individuals, because they probably have a whole bunch of very useful perspectives to share. So it's a challenge, And bottom line, it's really grassroots and who we know.
Yeah, thanks, Duncan. We'll probably get chat a little bit more about that as we go. So I'm just gonna go next to Dawn and ask Dawn just to introduce herself and give us a little bit of her background in the patient engagement space. Thanks, Dawn.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Sue, for your mini introduction. I'll complete it further. So I'm Dawn Barker, and I'm, I guess you can say, in the Toronto, Ontario region. I was actually born in Barbados. I came to Canada when I was about 3 years old with both my parents, who are both also born in Barbados. I'm a mother of three, and my children's ages are adults, actually, 31, 30, and 18. So that's my greatest accomplishment, and the most thing I'm proud of is, just raising wonderful children who are, making a great impact in society. And they're carrying on the torch, if you will. So that's important for me. So I have been in patient engagement for, I would say, about 5 to 6 years. And how that started was a result of a diagnosis that I had received. I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer in 2017. And that was actually in between two significant life events in my life and my family's life. One was losing my mother to multiple myeloma in 2015. And then in 2019, I lost my father to esophageal cancer. So smack dab in the middle was me with my diagnosis of breast cancer in 2017. So a lot of adversity, a lot of I guess hurdles to jump over. And that really was the pivotal moment for me with advocacy. I realized how important advocacy is to our loved ones' health care. So, seeing my mother go through her battle for over 12 years, it was an eye opener to the need for us to be present in the care of our loved ones. And I think that's really where advocacy started for me. And then with my diagnosis, because I was so avid in my family's life and trying to advocate for my mom during her journey, when I was diagnosed, I realized that I had to step up and speak up. But that didn't happen easily, because what had actually shifted that was when I was 40, I actually requested to have screening. And I was denied because of the age of screening that was at the time. Now things have changed a bit, but I was told, I don't need screening until I'm 50. But fast forward, I was diagnosed at 44. So that really opened my eyes to the need to advocate, the need to speak up. Um, I actually had never heard of triple negative breast cancer before I was diagnosed with it. So there was an opportunity for me, which is what I saw, an opportunity to create more awareness about triple negative. So at that point, I decided to start to reach out to organizations. I was quiet in my diagnosis, by the way. I didn't actually want to share it with many people, only my immediate family. And really, that's kind of a custom, I guess, in the Caribbean and African households, where we don't always talk openly about, things with our health. It's kind of a taboo situation, a taboo topic. So it's very closed in, and that was just generationally what I learned, is to sort of keep it to myself. So I felt that there needed to be kind of a growth moment, a shift with that. And so I decided to speak out about my diagnosis, speak out about my journey, speak out about the gaps in the healthcare system as well. So I decided to branch out and create a website, and really I call it a movement or a campaign, if you will. And I titled it NUI 50, which stands for what I was told, not until you're 50. So hopefully it will be put in the chat. But, being a triple negative breast cancer survivor and advocate, I found that it was needed. I needed to raise awareness and empower the underserved communities, particularly Black women, in the fight against breast cancer, because there are specific types of cancer that affect um, there's disparities, so triple negative in itself is one of the subtypes that affect Black women at younger ages and unfortunately later stages in life as well. So I decided to kind of, take matters into my own hands and try to amplify the voices and create a space of inclusivity and just speak about the survivorship, because I came out on the other end. So I want to be an encourager of those that there you can survive it. You can survive it if caught early enough. So I started the movement because, of that disparity. And I saw firsthand how systems fail to hear and respect and serve people like me. So, creating the website, creating a place where it demands culturally grounding space where faith-informed care is needed, and to develop just a space for survivors, especially Black women, like I said, to kind of feel included and feel heard and feel seen. So that's a bit about me. I've been also just working with different organizations. I've been a part of Women's College Hospital. I am the co-creator of their web hub called Every Breast Counts. And that was actually my first patient engagement role that I held. And from there, I've been involved. Well, I volunteer with the Olive Branch of Hope. That's actually where I reached out to and got connected to after my diagnosis and after my treatments were finished. Unfortunately, I didn't find the Olive Branch during my treatment. They are an organization that specifically focuses on Black women. So unfortunately, like I said, I didn't know about them. I just actually stumbled on Dr. Juliet Daniels, who's a researcher out of McMaster University, and she led me to the Olive Branch. So I've been volunteering with them, and I've also volunteer with the Canadian Cancer Trials Group. I've done patient engagement with CIHR. I've sat on the committee for Canadian Task Force on Preventative Healthcare, and I've done some work as well recently with OICR. And the Canadian Cancer Society as well. So yeah, I'm just thrilled to really amplify voices and to create a space for women like me who feel that they don't have a space and they're not heard or seen or represented in the way that they should be. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Dawn. That was incredibly inspiring, and I think these were some of the best introductions I've heard, and very powerful. So thank you. We're gonna move into the question kind of fireside chat part of our webinar, where we can dig a little bit deeper into some of the things that our panelists have raised. Thank you, Dawn, for continuing to add some resources into the chat, which is amazing. So I'm going to start with a question, which I think is a great question for everybody. In your role in patient engagement, what does influence mean to you? And at what point in your experience as a patient partner, did you kind of realize that you had some influence in the research space? Trudy, would you like to try that one first? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I think of influence as a patient partner, meaning that you have a meaningful voice in shaping the health research. And you're not just heard, but you're actually listened to, because there's a difference in just being heard or listened to. And I think having your insights or what you bring to the table actually inform decisions, I think that's when you have influence. So it's making sure that the research actually um, meets the patient's needs. I One of the reasons I did get involved was because I always found that research that there's not a lot of Canadian research out there on fibromyalgia, but I always found that what was out there wasn't really what I wanted to know. It wasn't what I not wanted to know for my daughter. It wasn't what I wanted to know for myself. And I'm a very frugal person, my family would say. So I saw it as a waste of money. I couldn't believe how much money was being wasted in the research segment because it just wasn't useful research. I mean, it's not research doctors want, it's not research patients want. So I I just found that it was just a waste of research dollars, and they're not all out. There's not a lot of research dollars out there for invisible conditions like fibromyalgia. So I wanted to see what was out there actually be used so that it could benefit the community. And when I realized it, actually was when I was involved in the modules that I talked about before, because I actually saw places like the MSSU using those modules, and I saw questions being asked in research that actually were relevant to the community. So I think I've worked with some really good researchers, and I think they helped me realize that I actually played a role. Um, when they ask you if you want to be part of the study, um, anything that they publish, it made me feel like maybe this was making a difference. If a patient partner could actually be part of the people that were listed in the published documents. So I think that's a major thing. And I have to say, in Fibromyalgia Association Canada, which is the name of the fibromyalgia group, when we started getting contacted by researchers or people started asking our opinion, or people commented to us that it has made such a powerful difference in their life, I think that's when I really realized how important it was and that what I was doing made a difference.
That was great. Thank you for that. Dawn or Duncan, do you want to weigh in on your experience in that with that? Duncan?
Sure, thanks, Sue. For me, what was interesting when I first joined the CPCOE was, and which was their endeavor, was to take a look at all the research that was being done on veterans at the time, and realize that very little of it had a Canadian nexus. And I suppose on the surface, that wouldn't make anyone question, if, I mean, the research comes out of the Department of Defense in the United States, monstrous organization, the ability to have a gigantic data set and get really good feedback from what's going on with active members and veterans. However, what we've come up with and what we notice is the power of identity and the power of culture, and how that dovetails into what happens after someone leaves the armed forces. And frankly, our cultures with the American military are not the same. And not the same by a little bit, but like not the same by a lot. And so, the endeavor to look at research that had been done, and the CPCOE would present us with that research and bounce it off a bunch of Canadian veterans, and we'd kind of all sit there and shake our heads and be like, it's not quite hitting the nail on the head. Like, it's good stuff and it's well done, but contextually it's missing a bit of the mark. And so then to have researchers tell us like, okay, that's useful, like we can tweak this and make it Canadian and do it again, and to feel that we were really kind of sticking our hand up and saying, wow, like great work out there. Can we, if we want to narrow it down to a Canadian population of Canadian Armed Forces veterans, like we can. We don't have to ride the coattails of the UK Defence Force. Again, great research coming out of there. Even the Australian Defence Force has tons of research that's coming out. Their work on transition for employment is outstanding stuff. But again, it's not the same work environment, so we can't just pick up that research and transplant it and dump it in Canada and have it work. So it's been really cool to see that level of influence of having researchers and practitioners kind of look at other members like myself of the Advisory Council of Veterans to say, okay, like help orient us on what the Canadian aspect of this looks like. And again, and then we run into the problem of how do we track down enough veterans and how do we diversify the people who are involved in the research, but it's doable. And one of the biggest things for me was the first conference, the first stakeholder engagement I went to in the fall of 2022. Like I was just blown out of the water that there was that many researchers working on veterans issues. And as a Canadian Forces member, I had no idea. And so I think as an influencer, my job is one way to look at researchers and say, hey, like, you can have to tweak this to a Canadian way of doing things, or this is how veterans think sometimes. So like looking for a perfect solution for veterans that's not what they want. They want something good enough and close enough, and then just carry on with it and put some energy into it, and it'll work. But also to go to veterans and say to veterans like, hey fellas, like we're not swinging in the wind here, ladies and gentlemen. Like there are groups of people out there who want to hear what's going on with you from a health perspective, from a transition perspective, from an employment perspective. Like it's huge right now. But if perhaps Canadian Forces veterans are still carrying on that kind of older mentality that emerged out of the 80s and 90s of no one wants to hear from veterans, or Canadian veterans, it's not a big deal, or it only pertains to our Korean and World War II vets. There could be a lot of veterans out there who are just quiet because they've been given the impression that's what's expected of them, when in reality they do have a voice. So I advocate to any research I can get involved in with the CPCOE, but I also advocate to the veteran community, my peers and colleagues who are still in. Like I talk to them all the time about what I'm doing and about how big and interesting some of these research projects are for when they transition and they want to get involved.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. I mean, it sounds like, with both you and Trudy, having, connecting with the right researchers and having the researchers who really are listening and hearing and seeing and modifying their course based on your input is really amazing. I know as a patient, I never got invited to do any research when I was a patient, and I would hear other people getting invited, and I'd be like, why am I not asked to do anything? And I was really keen to do it. And then when I got involved in one project as a patient partner, and then kind of the researchers said to me, well, we need more patients. How do we find more patients? And I'm like, it seemed like you always had patients. Like I was in shock to find out that they actually needed more patients. And that again comes back to this issue of creating this community to connect with these researchers who really want to hear from us. You got to find the researchers, and then you got to create the community, which we've already kind of talked about. Dawn, on the question of influence, could you weigh in on what that means to you, and when you realize you may actually have some influence?
Sure, sure. So, to me, influence means the ability to shift perspectives, open minds, and I guess really just guide decisions, especially in spaces where voices like mine haven't always been heard. And it's really about impact, you know. Influence sometimes are the quiet moments when someone rethinks how they design a study or chooses to include community members because of something that they heard or something that was shared. So, you know, I think it's creating change through presence and persistence and storytelling. I do a lot of storytelling. I have a couple of storytelling videos about my journey, things like that. And also influence means actively making space for voices and perspectives that aren't in the room. That's so important, you know, especially those in the Black communities. Now, when I realized I had influence, um, I think I realized I had influence when researchers began asking, not just what I thought, but how would I do things differently? You know, so my voice mattered. You know, when they started including me in early design and early phases, not just for a checkbox. So it's just moments like that, you know, the language shift, forms, the wording, the language. To be more inclusive. And what else? I don't know. Maybe just influencing in areas where I saw my lived experience and advocacy starting to shape conversations, much like places like I mentioned earlier, like Women's College Hospital. I really feel valued and respected, and you know, that my experiences matter, you know, that I matter, that what I share matters, and the gaps that I feel exist in the healthcare community that need to be addressed. So they do address it. They do, and I appreciate them for that.
Thank you, Dawn. That's amazing. Before we go to the next question, there is actually a question in the chat about your diagnosis and how did you get your first testing? Can you do you think you could help answer that? The person says they had their first bone density test at the age of 50 and had a shockingly low score. So how do you get yourself into be tested?
So is that for me,
Yeah,
Sue?
that's for you. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so well, as I spoke about earlier, I actually wanted to get screened at 40. And I wasn't afforded the opportunity to do that because of you know, just the age that it was recommended to start screening. And like I said before, I wish I had advocated for it for myself, because what I was actually told after my diagnosis, when I asked, well, how would I know when changes started to happen? I was told, well, we don't know because there's no previous scans to compare to. So that was like a punch to the gut, you know, because I tried. So that's why I emphasize so much how important advocacy is. If you want something and you feel it's right for you, you know, you have that personal choice to push for it. So I found the lump on my own. Um, and when I went, what I did was I first went to a walk-in clinic. I had the doctor assess. She, you know, realized that, okay, something might be a little off here. So I went for testing. I went for a biopsy. Then I was referred to a surgeon, and the surgeon confirmed that it was breast cancer. So yeah, I found it on my own, if that helps, if that answers the question.
Yeah, maybe it's something that you guys can connect with specifically after. There is another question in the chat. leveraging off of what we just talked about, the idea that you've all identified feeling valued, and that feeling of feeling valued has made you want to continue to do more. But the question is really about what did the researchers, I guess, or whatever organizations you were involved with the researchers, what did they do specifically to help make you feel valued? What was it? Was there anything specific?
I think something that made me feel valued with one of the studies I was involved in during COVID, and it was based on how seniors who lived at home with dementia were coping. Here in Nova Scotia, we really shut down, and we were in bubbles, and you couldn't even have your family. You were in separate bubbles. So people in the community who were living on their own with dementia were really set adrift because they couldn't have their personal care workers in, they couldn't have family, and it was just a very difficult time for them. And I was involved in research with that. And right up front, compensation was discussed. But what really impressed me more was the ask for, would you like to be listed as an author on this study? That was more valuable to me than the compensation was. And when the research ended, the researcher sent me a personal note on a beautiful handwritten note with the paper quill of the forget-me-not on the outside, which is the Alzheimer's and dementia flower. And she personally thanked me in handwriting. That cemented my feelings that I was a valued member, because that's important. And I've tried to remember that myself when I'm working with people with Fibromyalgia Association Canada, is making people feel valued. I think that has reflected everything I've done going forward.
Yeah, thoughts, anything to add, Duncan or Dawn?
No, Sue, sorry, Trudy covered it pretty well. Yeah, being included on papers, being included at the onset of any research, not in the middle, not near the end, but from the start, and actually having us continue involvement through to the end. I think that's important, is to have the longevity of the involvement, not just pull you in, reel you in at any given point. But yeah, I thoroughly appreciate just the acknowledgement on that. And as well, just I mentioned it in another event that I was in, just even nominations for what you have done and the work that you have contributed to is valuable, so that's all I would add to that. Duncan, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I think as as easy as it might be, or sorry, kind of oversimplified to just acknowledge that someone has a voice, but how powerful it is at the same time. And so, like, again, from a veteran perspective, I think when a lot of us finish our careers, we kind of just, fade away into the background and go and try and find some semblance of a normal Canadian life, whatever that looks like. So my experience with the CPCOE was, these people reached out and said, hey, no, you still have something to say. And it's not about being different or contrarian, or I see someone posted in the comments, they had to advocate for themselves. And I think a lot of us perhaps are raised with that idea of, no, be polite, and you don't have to attract attention to yourself. And it's not about that. It's not about saying I'm different. It's about saying I am distinct. And, because different has connotations of entitlement or I'm special or whatever. Whereas distinction is just saying, no, like, look, like, hey, I acknowledge what's going on out there, but it's not helping me. So what can I say to tell my story, which Don talked about storytelling. What can I say to tell my story, to just acknowledge that my perspective has value, and that's important going out. And it was really important for the CPCOE, for our group of veterans, for the CPCOE as a bunch of experienced researchers, to turn that back on us and say, hey, like, we're here to listen. Like, go ahead. Like, no, there's every now and then we had to be like, okay, guys, we're ranting a bit here. Let's like bring this back to something useful. But the idea of everyone's voice can be turned into a distinct path that we can leverage and we can use. And that's my love of this patient engagement piece and patient-oriented research. I think it's brilliant that we can take storytelling and we can take a rant and still trim it down to be like, actually, there's some really like useful things in here. And everyone loves a good story.
Yes, we do, for sure. And when it can be iterative, in terms of when you reach, and it doesn't have to be after working with a researcher for a long time, but when you're having a conversation about a particular research project, which has been my experience, and through the course of sharing your experience as a patient, you come another potential research project you've identified, and then you move forward with that research project as well. That's like really exciting, because it's not just about, I shared my experience, but it's an experience that 30% of patients are also facing. So it's, like, this is worth looking into, and recognizing that, yes, as someone put in the chat, we all have very different experiences, but many of us are having similar experiences that really need to get looked at. So there's a few questions in the chat, but the first question about evidence from the patient community to represent the broader community ties very nicely into our next question. So I think it will be answered in the next question, which is really about asking each of you on the panel to talk about, Duncan, you've talked about this a little bit, but maybe a different slant on it, is how you and your organizations make connections with patients and work together with other patients on the team to both do research, but also to support your communities and to make sure that you have a diverse group. But Dawn mentioned that, I loved what you said, Dawn, about making spaces for those who aren't in the room. Like, how do we do that within the network we're trying to create? So I would just pose that question out to you as you're growing your networks, and thinking about how that network can support research, but can also be a supportive community itself. Would anybody like to take that one first? Duncan, would you be interested?
I think for me, it's again, we still have a challenge with reaching veterans broadly, but there are more newsletters and other things going out now. Like, we have the Canadian Institute of Military and Veteran Health Research. It's called CIMVER. They have a really active journal. So through LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, that stuff gets out. But the thing that I find, looking at Deborah's question here, is if the community isn't prepared to listen about what's being done, and then form opinions on it, it's a two-way street. It's hard to reach out to a community if the community itself hasn't decided it wants to speak up. And I know that's kind of, if no one wants to listen, who am I talking to? So I guess I better be quiet. I know that's not at all what I'm getting at. I'm just trying to say, like, it is challenging. It's exceptionally challenging, to have it get some traction. And so just time, slowly pick away at it.
Thanks, Trudy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think I try not to speak for everyone in my community. And I have to say, as a person with fibromyalgia, that's relatively easy, because fibromyalgia is a condition that no one has the same symptoms. It's different for every single person. I've learned that very early, because just a quick example, my daughter, her fibromyalgia causes a lot of muscle pain. And for me, isn't muscle pain, it's more bone pain. And so I learned, she was diagnosed at 8, so I learned very quickly, and maybe that's what's helped me, is that no two people are the same with the fibromyalgia. So I try not to speak for the entire community. I try to um, kind of keep it as there's maybe classic symptoms, such as pain, sleep disorders, that kind of thing. But everybody in my community is different. So um, I try to keep a broader perspective. I agree with what Duncan said a while ago. Having influence doesn't always mean you have to be in the spotlight. I think it can be that you guide other people so that they become more of an advocate and they get their chance to speak. And I think that's important in your community is to get voices from all different perspectives heard. And I think it's really important. But I'm sitting here listening to us, and it's amazing to me how closely is that 6 degrees of separation, right? Because listening to Duncan, my husband served 36 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. And I know I watched him go through that. One day you're in uniform and the next day you're not. And there's no transition for that. My husband, he wouldn't like me talking about this because he was from the era where you didn't speak out. They said jump, you said how high, right? And so, but I spent over a year just trying to help him transition from the military to civilian life. And it was many times I've talked to him about whether, sometimes I look at the Canadian Armed Forces as they create PTSD. And yet they never offer any treatment for people leaving the forces. He's had some pretty awful experiences in his position. I mean, we were here in Nova Scotia when Swiss Air happened, and the forces were involved in that, and Afghanistan, and just different things like that. So, it's amazing to listen to you, Duncan, because I'm right there with you as a person who was married to someone with 36 years in the military. And Dawn, it's interesting. I'm amazed at your story because my mom had breast cancer. And when I hit 40, it was mammograms every year, and it's been every year since. And I'm thinking, um, yeah, like, how did that happen? And my daughters are in the same position, and it was their grandmother, right? And yet it's like we jumped to the top of the lineup, right? And I'm listening to you, and I know I'm a very privileged person, and I do think that the fact that I'm, a white woman of education, I think that has a lot to do with it. And so I just find that shocking, but not surprising. So, I mean, Nova Scotia, I am well aware how the healthcare system, discriminates. And I worked with a researcher at the MSSU actually, and she talked about the fact that African Nova Scotian people are not offered reconstructive surgery in their initial breast cancer treatment, whereas I would be. That would be one of the first things that would be discussed with me. And so I'm well aware of my privilege, and I really try to make sure I am aware of that and that I don't ever use that in my community or anywhere else. So, yeah, I'm really sorry for what you had to go through, Dawn, and I appreciate listening to your story.
Thank you, Trudy. Dawn, do you want to weigh in on this question, particularly about how we can do a better job, or how you've done, how you've been able to be successful at bringing the voices and perspectives of people who aren't in the room to the table. Do you have any secrets for that?
You know what? If you want to call it a secret, it's really about emphasizing how much we need to have the healthcare system generate a trustworthy behavior. So I say that because sometimes it's said that, people of African ancestry and those in the Black communities don't trust the healthcare system. And it's for good reason. But I challenge us to shift the verbiage and just ask, how can the healthcare system create a more trustworthy atmosphere for us, and help us to feel like we can open up and we can share and we can be heard and seen. So it's just shifting it a little bit and taking the onus off of the Black community to trust, but rather to create trust, help us to feel like we can be in a safe space among, the health professionals that we deal with. And for me, having gone through what I went through, you can see why, trust can be a little bit shaky for me and for others in the community, in the Black community, because it all goes back to the Atlantic slave trade and the improper treatment that a lot of the African people went through. So, there's a reason behind it. It's not just we just decided to not trust the healthcare system. There's ancestral things that have happened dating way back, So, we are coming from a place of broken systems. So we are here to try to mend those broken systems and create a more inclusive environment for us to be in. So yeah, just building trust. It's very, very important to build trust with the Black community and those of BIPOC, the BIPOC community in general.
That's really good. A good tip. Not a secret, but you're right. Something to keep very much in mind. I know in our community, the kidney disease community, there was actually a risk equation, or like a risk equation for kidney disease that considered race as one of the key factors of when intervention was needed. And I think that still exists in the US, but there's not been used in Canada anymore. And that's just a very recent thing. But I think from an advocacy perspective, like if our communities are able to advocate for things, we definitely think I wouldn't have known about that problem with the equation, right? Without engaging in the Black community to say, because it just seems so unbelievable that would still be there, and that the medical teams would still be considering that. And so it's so important to find these things out. And again, it speaks to how having that broad community and understanding what the challenges and gaps are that all members of your community are facing, so that you can really focus in on the advocacy pieces that will really make a difference.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Sue, a lot of times, we want to the organizations want to involve the Black community, but again, there's that trust piece. So if you want to involve the Black community, get to know the Black community. Don't just be an asker, be a doer. Go out there and understand what we've been through. Go out there and understand what prevents us from engaging in, these discussions. So just branch out, step outside of your comfort zone, and get to know what we've been through and get to know us a little more before you kind of pull us in here. Let me get her in, let me get them in. Just go out there and ask, and go out into the community and get to know us.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you so much. I'm just checking the Q&A. Okay, I'm gonna come back to these questions in a minute. I recognize those questions. I just want to move to shift a little bit for our panel, and ask. So it's a question about your path to doing the things that you're doing now, to open a path for other patients. And that is like, how did you, we understand that you felt valued and things like that, but how did you build your confidence, certainly, especially as a patient or a patient or someone who's experiencing the system, as in a different way to being someone who's helping to shape the system? How did you get the confidence to do that? How did you grow your confidence over the years to be able to do what you're doing now? Because that's you're kind of flipping things from being, kind of someone who's in the system, experiencing the system, to helping to shape it, I guess is the best way. Does Trudy, would you like to take that one?
Sure. When I first started with the CIHR, IMHA, I was always asked about the fibromyalgia community. In fact, I felt very much out of my league when I was there because my daughter was the only other person I knew with fibromyalgia. And so I wasn't really able to represent the fibromyalgia community. But as I developed through stages, I realized I didn't need to. What I needed to do was to be more involved in the engagement part and getting people within communities to actually be involved and to have a say in what the research was. So when I became a patient engagement research ambassador, I found that the change in leadership really instilled confidence in me that what I was doing was important, even though I didn't have that link to community. I found that it came from the top, and how much we were appreciated, the fact that we were supported in developing the patient engagement modules. And it was that process of realizing that my contributions were valuable to the CIHR. I mean, that's a big deal. And it was that confidence I developed as a patient engagement research ambassador that really led me to expanding my reach outside of IMHA and becoming involved with the MSSU and even having their support when I realized that that other projects I got involved with didn't really do patient engagement as well as they should be. It gave me that confidence to speak up. It gave me the confidence to recommend that researchers involve us right from the beginning, and to I didn't know people in the fibromyalgia community, so that made it even more important that I reach out to that community and get involved and find out what it was that they needed out of research and what they needed out of having their own association. So, but I do credit the support I got from IMHA and the support from the leadership there and all the other patient partners. We all had different conditions, but yet we also supported each other just in what we were doing there, and that's where I got the confidence, because I did not have it when I first started. I really felt like I didn't belong there for quite a long time, actually.
It's a heavy burden to be speaking on behalf of their patients, and sometimes when they're not at the table, as we've already discussed. Dawn, did you want to add to that?
I think for me, I wasn't initially comfortable. My philosophy is do it scared, you know, do it scared. I went in there first just being nervous, and I realized as I went that I gained more confidence each time. And, the value that my story brings or other people's story brings. I encourage people to share because, it might just be the turning point that somebody needs in that very moment, so that's why it's storytelling is so needed and so valued because you could be saving someone's life by sharing your story and sharing the triumph of what you've been through. So yeah, I didn't start off with confidence. I still get nervous at times, what you never really goes away. But you do it because it's impacting lives. And for me, that's enough. If I can change one person's life trajectory, I've done my job, but I feel it's my obligation as a survivor to share my journey and share my experiences because I know someone listening, it will touch one person, So that's why I do it. I'm never ever fully comfortable, never ever fully confident in its, in its right. But we do it, and I'm sure others will testify to this that we know that it's impacting lives that are listening to our stories. So I have to do it. I don't see myself doing anything other than being a passionate advocate as I am.
Well, another Dawnism that I truly love, do it scared. I think that's an amazing one
Can,
to go by.
can I just add to what Dawn said there? Because it's true. That's recently I had someone from Belgium actually contact me through LinkedIn and told me that she felt so alone with her fibromyalgia because they didn't have any kind of organization, and that the posts that we do have made her feel less lonely. And at another time when I was doing, we had what we call holiday hangouts. And so we get together as a group and just talk about things at Christmas time, how difficult it is sometimes to be alone at Christmas time. And one of the ladies there spoke up and said, having Fibromyalgia Association Canada has made her rethink applying for the MAID program. And it just has to be what Dawn said, just one person. That's all it is, that you're helping one person. And so I just think what you said, Dawn, was so very important.
I want to get to Adriana's question. It actually will be part of our final question, Adriana, so we won't forget about you. But to the confidence, the issue of confidence, I'm going to I want to take it to Duncan, but Duncan, I want to put a twist on it for you. In terms of your own confidence, but also, I mean, how did you gain your own confidence? But also, how do you mentor others to kind of do some of the things that you're doing? Because it is a bit of a mentoring. It is a bit of a trying to bring people in to say, but we can do good work. We can make change. And here's how we're doing it. So how have you built your own confidence up, and how do you build that of others to join you in this work?
I actually really enjoy Dawn's statement there as well. Do it scared. Another good one from Brene Brown is bravery is just fear walking. So, yeah, like the world's unforgiving, right? So if you're gonna stick your hand up and say, "Please listen to me," that takes a bit of you can't wait till you're 100% ready, and so you have to do it. I've been very fortunate in that within the CPCOE we have a huge we just have some huge characters in there, and both from the staff and on the advisory council. So I've been very fortunate to feed off those individuals. And the atmosphere that we have created for ourselves is one of I wouldn't say blind support, but if someone wants to stand up and do something, the rest of the group is there to keep them going. I really, I waffle a lot on how to mentor someone else who may not have the same perspective that I do of how to treat obstacles. And sometimes my perspective from years of being in the Canadian Forces of just charging forward with things is not always beneficial. potentially. And it's not always received well. And I'm working on that too. You know, coming from a grounded place to present a very serious topic or one that is emotionally charged for myself. Like I have to, you know, reconnect with myself sometimes and say, okay, man, like you can't talk like that to everyone. You can talk like that to my friends, but I can't talk like that to everyone. Because they won't receive it. They won't see it as confidence, or they won't see it as action and advocacy. They'll see it as something they don't want to tolerate. So if there's anything I would give to someone else to help them grow their confidence is, you know, be honest with themselves, and try and be as genuine as they can in the language they use and in the perspective they bring. And unfortunately, again, like Don said, unfortunately you have to step into it. Like you gotta lean into it first, see how it's received, and hopefully you have a support network in behind you that can kind of catch you when you stumble and be like, nope, keep going, it's okay, it didn't land that time, but it will. Like, so just keep leaning forward. So I'm with Don. Like, anyone looking to get started, it's the best way to start is to start. And that's not fair for me to say. You could ask my wife. I drag my heels on pretty much anything, like whether that's chores, home projects, yard work, you know, self development. Like, I drag my heels everywhere. So, you know, but especially with this, if it's something that means something to you and it's something that you want to be a part of, start. And you'll probably get rejected a couple times, and then eventually you'll find yourself on a webinar speaking with a bunch of great people who I've never met before, and can really only thank Don Richards for first taking me up on an open-ended offer. So it comes together eventually.
Thank you, Duncan. And you know, wives just have to say that because we have to keep people humble. That's what.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. I know that as a patient, like as somebody who's founded, you know, 2 patient organizations, and, you know, growing the network is a big worry for me, and also because I know I can't lead this forever. I know I need people who are going to be coming in behind me that can pick up the slack and not the slack, but keep the passion, keep going with that. And I'm sure that occupies lots of your time as well. Making sure that, you know, what the good work you're doing can continue if you can't do it anymore, which is so typical of us as patients. You know, that we need to make sure more than anything that there's people coming up behind us. How do you do that? How do you manage that in your organizations? And then we will go to Andreas, which is the last question. After this one is, you know, what advice do you have to someone wanting to start out their own organization, apart from just doing it? Do we have some which is key, but some practical tips? So just before we get to that one, this one, which is really just about how do you build sustainability within your organizations, always as leaders, and making sure that that there are people coming up behind you that can take on some of the things you're doing now. Any thoughts on that, Dawn?
Yeah, I'll add some thoughts. I think just show up. Show up, you know, that's half the battle. And I think that for me, a lot of times I'm the only person of color in the room or at the table. And I don't see it as a deterrent. I see it as an opportunity. So an opportunity to shift the narrative, to bring new perspectives that may otherwise be overlooked in shaping conversations, just challenging assumptions and reframing issues through culturally informed lenses, you know. Also, in my influence, I feel, can create more visibility. It can create a presence that can lead to greater visibility and a chance to be a trailblazer, you know, who opens doors for others, for underserved communities. That's the way I look at it. And also just providing authentic representation, ensuring that my lived experience of my community is heard and considered in decision making. So that's pivotal for me, and that's why I do what I do, and as well just to continue the legacy for my children and those coming after me, and the women who might be diagnosed down the road. So it's not about me anymore because I've already been through it. It's about the next generation.
really about setting that example, really, is what you're saying, I think. Trudy, did you have any comments on that?
Well, I have to say that in the fibromyalgia community, it's something you have every day. So, and then there's the problem of flares, and so it's hard to get continuity and people who are willing to step up and do what you do. Like I'm working really hard to have a succession plan because you're right. I mean, we all have to step away at some point, right? And but I have to admit that is one part of Fibromyalgia Association Canada I struggle with. It's really hard to get people to fully commit because their condition dictates what they do every day of their life, and they're quite happy to have somebody else do it. And so I hope that it doesn't come down to if I'm not there, then somebody has to step up. I really would like it so that there is a succession plan in place. And that's been really challenge, but it's also been something that I'm really working hard on. And so I have to say that our executive has expanded. And fortunately, I think I've found people who will come in behind. So because quite frankly, you can't be there forever, right? And so I had a bit of some health conditions come up that not fibromyalgia related in the fall, and that's what made me really think hard about I can't do this forever. So I need to start really educating people on the need to continue this. So yeah, it's a struggle though, and I think it's a struggle. I think COVID has added to that it's more difficult to get volunteers. It's more difficult to get people engaged in things. So yeah, that's so I'm not successful at that.
Well, we're all working, it keeps me up at night, and it's one of those things that perhaps the topic of a future webinar. Perhaps we could suggest that we could spend a whole hour and a half on that itself. So I'm going to the last question. I'll do Duncan first. So just to respond to Andrea, who's you know, it looks like maybe thinking about doing something in the area of long COVID, where there could be a patient community around that could look more into that and help with the research. What advice would you have someone like her or anyone that's interested in kind of doing some of the things that we've done in terms of creating those networks, creating those advocacy and research opportunities that maybe didn't exist before? How do you, and again, yes, do it. We say do it, but what do you have practical tips about how to get started? Duncan, would you like to start?
Yeah, that's a tremendous endeavor. That's a huge hurdle. I'm impressed. You know, for someone leaning into that one, and that, you know, in its simplest way, like obviously, you know, the keep going, but also if you want someone to understand where you're coming from, you have to arm them with that information as best as you can. You know, I'm not really sure what that would look like for long COVID, but getting that information out to targeted practitioners and clinicians to say, hey, like this is what this looks like. And then trying to understand their perspective. You know, if presenting them with those facts is not taking hold, then ask them why. I think the healthcare system has its own challenges, and you might get a political answer, but hopefully, eventually, you can find someone who will give you an answer where they want you to understand why it's difficult to take on that topic or take on that treatment. But it's seeking understanding and also trying to understand where your stakeholders are held up, and not an easy endeavor by any stretch of the imagination, but
easy but worthy. I know that for our organization, we got started, and certainly we've got a long way to go, hopefully. We started out with a researcher interested in this space, researcher who really valued patient participation, and organized a workshop, just an initial workshop around, bring patients together around what, as diverse a group as possible. They were willing to fund that workshop, the researcher, to just really look at what it is that patients, where are the gaps, where are the challenges, and really was out of that workshop actually that Don Richards helped us with, where really the beginnings of our organization started. So that is one potential way. Other suggestions maybe from Trudy?
Collaborate with groups that have something in common with you. I find that helps. And long COVID is often linked with ME and linked with fibromyalgia. So those are communities I mentioned there. I know I do some work with I Can See ME, because my daughter developed ME after she had fibromyalgia. Fortunately for her, she's one of the lucky people who went into remission. It was mild. Um, but so I do work with I Can See ME, and that's a good group that actually works closely with the long COVID organizations. Take advantage of the fact that people actually are talking about long COVID now. I know it's an invisible disability, and it's very similar to fibromyalgia that way. So um, the ER is a scary place for people with fibromyalgia, because with an invisible illness, people tend not to believe that you're in as much pain as you're in, or that something else is happening. So I know it's the same with long COVID. And so, yeah, try to connect with communities that have things in common with you, and get advice on, how to get established.
Good advice, Trudy. What, Dawn, do you have any thoughts on getting something going if you feel like your disease area is not being represented?
Research, research, research. That's what I did. As sometimes I was up late at nights just researching and seeking out information, and then forming your next steps. So, if I could, leave you or the viewers or the listeners with anything, I would say just research what you want to talk about, research what's important to you, and your passions. Your lived experience is enough. We are the data. We are the data. So we hold a lot of importance to research and where research is going. So I would say finding focus groups to attend, reaching out to like-minded individuals, um, contacting organizations, just putting yourself out there and asking the questions.
Excellent advice. Also love that. We are the data, which we certainly are. We bring our lived experience in, and we know the value of it. It takes us a little while sometimes to figure that out, but once we figured it out, and really, I think in terms of mentoring other people, it's really about imparting and ensuring that they understand the value of that and how it's made a difference for us, and how our voices have made a difference. We are at time, and really appreciate everybody joining us today. I think it was a great conversation. Thank you to our panelists for being so open and helpful and thoughtful. I've certainly learned so much today. We're hoping, the organizers are hoping that you will fill out a quick survey that I believe, yes, has been put in the chat. I think it'll only take you a minute or so to fill out. So if we could ask everybody to do that. You can also sign up for webinars for the PXP, newsletters and webinars at the PXP mailing list, which there you go, already in the chat. And as people are filling out that survey, just ask any of our panelists if they have any final words or comments that they weren't able to already express.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Don Richards for inviting me here to speak. I hope that some little nugget of what I've shared touch someone or help someone. And, I hope it's giving them a little bit of confidence to go out there and just reach for the stars, really. Just go after what your heart desires. Thank you.
Sure, for sure. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Thanks to our great panelists. Amazing. You guys have done amazing work. We really appreciate it. Thanks for everyone who joined us today. And I'm sure that we'd all be happy if you wanted to reach out to us individually with any additional questions. And thanks to Dawn Richards for the opportunity to get together and talk about this today. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your evening.